retail stores, or you name it, places that we all want to come and go and do business and enjoy the community and go get around and be with our families and friends, to get out and have a life. So what comments do the four of you have before we let loose this really aggressive crowd? Not aggressive, but a really smart crowd, really knows their stuff. They've got personal experience, they have family experience, they know what they're talking about. But, you know, what have you seen for public and private accommodations and gains or places that can be improved? Let's start with that.
Well, I do know that I went to my new dentist's office 2 days ago, and it's a new office. They moved, they renovated everything, and I got up to the front door, and there was a doorbell with a sign that said, "Push if you need help." So I'm thinking it was a nice, bright, sunny day when I went there, but what if it's pouring? What if it's winter? You know, it's, you know, things are still not where they should be. I have noticed an improvement in things like curb cuts in big cities like Portland. But they're not maintained super well. And we always know we need more handicap parking spaces. There's a lot of disabled people out there that use those spaces that seem to be able to move around really well. I'm sure we've all seen them, but that was my experience the other day.
Placards. I know some, nothing wrong with that.
Anybody else? No?
Well, it's actually funny. I do live in Westbrook, and Westbrook is, on its main street, is under major construction challenges right now. I'm not even able to comfortably go to do banking and stuff, or walking independently to do that. Actually, the architect now for one, Jojo Hannon, lives in Westbrook too, and she sent an email off to city officials, so I backed up her email with one, and we're going to try to meet with them to talk about ADA and just paying attention to those types of things for pedestrians who still want to be able to enjoy all the pleasures of the community and I guess I'd also like to just throw in some issues around housing. Gail, I worked in employment for years, and I would agree that employment of people with disabilities is an extremely challenging position. The hardest job that I've had in my career is the work that I'm doing now, trying to secure accessible housing for people with tax-credited properties or subsidized rents. It's virtually impossible to find. People are waiting for years on wait lists. And then when you ask somebody to put in a ramp or widen the door or put in a keyless entry, you would think that you were asking them to go bankrupt. So I would argue that, you know, housing, if somebody can't even have a stable place, a stable roof over their head that they can get out of the front door to, there's no way that we can even begin to look at public transportation, employment, and those pieces. So a lot of work still needs to be done. In 88, I believe, was a good foundation. I believe that it almost feels like the voice of the disability movement saw when that got passed or slowed down because we had hope. Here we go. I really think it's going to be a united cross-disability effort of keeping the pressure on to move some of these issues.
That's a great comment. So let's take that a little bit further. Essentially what you're saying is, you know, and I agree, the ADA passed, we have a lot of hope, and then the independent living movement that really pushed for the ADA along with others, sort of took a deep breath and said, great, we did it, and sat back and sort of expected things to happen. And I think over time we realized maybe we need to do more, but what's your opinion on that, Eric? How do we keep this going, or have we gotten too complacent?
I think there is perhaps a bit of complacency, but also the ADA being a complaint-based law makes it really challenging to
the next wave of change for people with disabilities really is going to have to derive from a movement again, which inspired the original ADA. My perception is that the ADA, again, when we talk about leveling the playing field, it created opportunities for people that might have previously been inspired leaders in the movement, move on to different economic opportunities perhaps. Like, I'm not going to contribute to the movement necessarily, now I can just go be a lawyer and make money or something to that effect. I think being activated, engaged, and present in the community for people with disabilities is the key to the next wave of change. When we were talking about public accommodations earlier, the State House in Augusta, the People's House, was not accessible until, in terms of the respective chambers, the House and the Senate, until a gentleman, Bill Schneider, who used a wheelchair, was elected and served in public office. At that point, they made the reasonable accommodations, and whether it was automatic doors or making the bathrooms accessible and so forth, to level that playing field. And that came about simply because there was somebody there that needed to access a level of accessibility to allow them to participate. So I really, I would agree with Jeremy. I think if we can get to the point where it makes good economic sense, which it already does, if we can get to this mainstream position of, when I build a house, I'm just going to naturally build it accessible without any thought of how this might directly impact me. I'm just going to do it because it makes good business sense, because we know that 1 in 5 people has a disability, and that at some point it might impact an owner. So why wouldn't I just make my unit more attractive in the marketplace by making it accessible? Throughout my 4 campaign cycles, I knocked on probably 10,000 plus doors throughout my district. Some of those doors multiple times. I can state confidently from that experience that less than 1% of those buildings were accessible. We're talking residential homes. That's pretty scary when you consider that there's, what, 230,000, 250,000 Mainers that have a disability. Maybe they don't necessarily have a physical disability, but a significant chunk of them probably do, that would want to be homeowners at some point, I would imagine, and own an accessible unit. So I think technology is leading the way and showing us. I know probably multiple people in this room, I can see them, have iPhones on them, and right now accessibility features are becoming a natural piece of technology where you can access things like Siri through voice activation or change the fonts on your screens to make them more accessible. I hope that we see a similar trend line with businesses, with all of culture, that we're moving toward a more accessible mainstream place where we are recognizing that disability is just an inherent part of life.
Well, you made a comment there that really struck home for me, Matt, and that is how people with disabilities actually getting involved in their communities so that people who are likely to want to make some kind of change. And so I'd like some of the other folks here to respond to that, whether they agree with that or don't agree with that, and why that might be. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I believe it is absolutely up to people with disabilities to be fully engaged in the community. The more we're present, the more of a difference we're going to make. It's not enough to think that, oh, we have the Maine Human Rights Commission, we have Disability Rights Maine, we have different state agencies. They are going to be beneficial as you're trying to bring action and suit and that type of thing. But the real cultural change is going to be us being fully engaged in our communities.
Daphne, you have a thought on that?
I totally agree with that. I know that in the past that I've been very involved in community organizations and also things in the school, and the more that I'm around people, the more people have come to me and told me that they understand or have a better understanding of some of the physical disability anyway. So I think that that's, really vital for us to stay involved as much as possible.
And earlier you talked about the new school you moved to and how they took you over there to check it out and make sure it was okay. Would you think that's part of, because you've been so involved for so long in the school system, that, again, discussion has gone is fascinating, because we're trying to talk about the ADA in 5 titles, and we're having a more general discussion about what it's like to live with a disability, but I think it's great, really an in-depth discussion with some real personal experience here. And let's go back out again to the audience. I'm going to go with Eric, and then Gil, and then the gentleman behind Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric Gibner. I'm an accessibility specialist. I work with the state. And there have been so many remarks, as Dennis noted, that are covering the whole ball field of what we're engaged in trying to create a more accessible society. I think the law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, is just one piece of the puzzle. And it's only a law. It can only do what it says inside it. But the point of having the law is to open the door, and then presumably through having more people with disabilities accomplishing things, getting into programs, getting into office or into a house or whatever, all those things will gradually make society change. But the law itself is not going to change society. Law is only opening the door. And the change that we're looking for is like 3 legs of a stool. The law is one part of it. The involvement of people with disabilities in speaking up and making their voice heard at the council chambers and in the legislature is another part of it. And the third part of it is society coming around and listening and paying attention. But the Americans with Disabilities Act has nothing to do with private housing. We need more laws around making the private housing sector more accessible. There's no visibility law in Maine that requires developers to do anything other than build stairs at the front entrance. So there's plenty more to be done in terms of law, but there's, I think, definitely without, and when I say consumer advocacy, without people filing complaints, there is no law. The law does nothing until someone files a complaint, really. So if I realize you're carrying the ball, and you're saying, well, okay, I'm going to fill out the form, I'm going to go to the Maine Human Rights Commission. It's a labor. Someone's got to do it, though, and if the disenfranchised people don't stand up and file a complaint, there is no result.
Thank you. Good comments. Yeah. Gil?
I don't think there's a single town in the state of Maine that has adopted the ANSI codes for the building codes for private housing. Can't remember what ANSI stands for right now, but they're the building codes, and I think they've been developed under the ADA. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if ANSI was developed under the ADA or it's from a different direction.
But I don't think any town has adopted those as their building standards.
Not to my knowledge.
No. And until something like that happens, we're not going to get any private housing. It's my impression that these 2 sections you're talking about they're visible, ramps and curb cuts and private, and the handicap parking, lower counters and so on. But, and I don't know if I can say this right, but they seem to be in place more because of the elderly and those with infirmities than they are for people with disabilities. That's just my impression, that they've been more accepted from the economic point of view in retail establishments and so on, because there's a business sense in doing it, and it's more because of the elderly getting older than it is for people with long-term disabilities, being more evident in the marketplace. So
That's a great comment, with Maine being now the oldest state in the country. It would seem,
we're seeing more businesses do it, I think, because of that.
and I think we'll see more of that nationally too. But I want to ask you this question for everybody, really, is I was reading comments by Lex Fried, one of the leaders of the independent movement, talking about the ADA and the progress over 25 years. And what struck me, that Lex said, very true, it says, if we're smart, we will align ourselves with the baby boom generation that is aging out of the system now, and really latch on to them as partners in accessibility, because they will be demanding that communities be more accessible as they acquire disabilities. And I've heard people with disabilities would say, they can't take away our subject, that's ours. And I agree with Lex, it's not ours, it's everybody's. It's about making communities livable and accessible for everybody. So even though we may not feel too happy that they're beyond that, all that power, let them have it. Let's just join right with them and continue to push for a more accessible and livable community. And I didn't even interrupt you, but
No, but you said it better.
Kathy?
So I don't know what I missed because I went out to have a cigarette, which is an addiction probably leading to more disability. But anyway, while I was just standing there, the people in front of me waiting for the bus were saying, well, I don't know, it's just so scary. She's bipolar, and her mother's bipolar, and they're so scary. I mean, what are you going to do? You can't lock them up anymore. And so going back to when I left, we were talking about changing hearts and minds. There's so many parts of this, but I'm only been in Portland, living in Portland for a year, and so I offer to the Independent Living Council and all the other organizations or people here, you know, can we spawn from this conversation, going back to what we used to do to get it passed? Can we go out and like once a month, cross-disability discussion panel everywhere, and at least starting with Portland or Cumberland County or schools, or maybe it's already happening, but I'm talking about a joint with disability represented, including intellectual and psychiatric and deaf community.
It's a great idea. We're in, so we'll talk some more about it.
Okay.
This gentleman's been waiting patiently.
Yeah, and in terms of getting more education, I'm struck by the fact that I completed graduate school, and I grew up with two parents who with physical disabilities. But throughout all of my schooling, throughout all of high school or college or graduate school, very rarely were disabilities discussed. Was the issue of disability discussed? No disabled individuals with disabilities came to speak to the class, unless it was my father, who sometimes came. So I can't help but wonder, you know, I guess in some ways I was kind of fortunate to have my lived experience be shaped by that, but most people don't have that, and are, I mean, some of the things that Mel said about just, I mean, I don't know how else to put it other than ignorant statements like, you know, how can a blind person watch TV when they can't see, and things like that. You know,
I get that question all the time.
yeah, exactly. You know, so I guess the question is how can we change? How can we educate people when just, you know, I can only look at my own education history, but a fair amount was made of the plight of African Americans and slavery, of the LGBT movement, of the plight of Jewish Americans. Virtually nothing on disability as a topic or individuals with disabilities.
Very true.
So
Yes, sir.
I just say one thing because mine's going to segue beautifully with that. I work at the University of Southern Maine in teacher preparation. And I teach a course on exceptionality. It's an introduction course. And teachers who are going into education and general education or special education have to take that course to get their teacher's certification. So anybody who wants to become a teacher has to take that course. So Daphne, you probably are aware of this course being in schools. Everybody has to take this course to become a teacher. But it's also a course in our university that anybody can take in the certain pathways to get certain types of credits. So I often have non-teachers who also take the course. My purpose in that course is to introduce people to people who have disabilities on an affective level. So you're talking about attitude, that's what my course is all about. Even though I also need to teach them how to introduce students in their classrooms educationally, because I'm a passionate person, my job and my course is to have them understand who people are with disabilities and to have passion for them and to understand who they are. So when my students leave my class, they want to embrace people with disabilities in their classrooms. The major project that they have to do at the end of the course is educate, advocate, and take action. So at the end of the course, they have to have done some education in the community, advocate for a type of disability, and do some type of action project. So they have to find an organization in autism or an organization in intellectual disabilities or some type of physical disability and do some type of activity with that organization. So I do my best. It is a slow process in terms of what you all are talking about, but it's proactive. My belief is that these teachers are working with students in their classrooms with disabilities and that they are working alongside other students who are going to be the shop owners and the employers and the housing, the people who are renting houses, and that they're going to have more positive understandings and attitudes toward people with disabilities, and that's my slow and steady process toward advocating for people with disabilities. So that's the attitude piece that I'm trying to teach in that course. There are other courses that they also take that they launch from there, but that's the piece that what you're talking about you felt was missing. That's my contribution toward that. I also have a brother who's a quadriplegic, so I've also experienced it firsthand. But my job and at the university is to do that. So I hope that in a proactive way that eventually that we'll have more people with a better attitude, working alongside, living with, housing, providing opportunities for people with disabilities.
Well, thank you. I have a question on what you're doing, only in that I agree with where the panelists were coming with their comments about we need to get involved, and it was mentioned, if we want the law to work, we need to make complaints, and we really need to change people's hearts and minds. People need to know who we are living in our communities. However, I think we would all be reluctant to be the so-called poster child of disability, to be in front of the class,
Oh no, they're not doing that.
well, I just want to caution how people who don't have disabilities take this on and portray people or explain disability, because there's a saying in the disability movement, nothing about us without us. And that goes to the heart of sometimes what the issues is that things are designed without our input, or they create laws or programs or rules without our input. And therefore, it goes back to who's in control of one's life. Is it my life and I make the choices about it, good or bad? Or is it someone trying to make decisions for my life that I may or may not want or agree with? And so I think that's where there sometimes are difficulties working with the community. And I'm not saying that you're doing that, because I'm not getting the whole gist of what you're doing. But I think it's important to make that statement out front here that it's got to include us. We've got to be in the middle of whatever happens for change. In fact, we need to be leading that change. So, I don't know if anyone's got any comments up here or
No.
We'll take final comments from the audience and then make sure we have time for cake and refreshments.
What about the video? Is the video working?
I didn't hear that.
Is
Well, the video.
Well, the video.
Is there definitely we can get the video to work?
Well, yeah, when we break for cake, we're going to work on that video and see if we can get it to work.
Okay, well, before we end, before we go back to the audience one more time, I want to really appreciate the fact that we have this